Welcome back to Chamber Exchange, the TV show, and want to thank Bank Hometown for making it happen. I mentioned some breaking news out of Washington in the last few days, and that is that we have in the Senate a bipartisan infrastructure bill. 60 senators voted in favor of that bill, all of the Democrats and 19 Republicans, which hopefully is a sign of other progress on other issues. But this is a huge deal for our country, and it's still not done. Needs to go through the Congress, and then I think final reconciliation, then signed by the president. But a major infrastructure bill, which means a lot for us here in Massachusetts and Central Mass. I'm thrilled to have with us on this segment the Chamber's Director of Government Affairs and Vice President, I forgot about the promotion, right. Vice President of Government Affairs and Public Policy, Alex Guardiola. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you for having me, Tim.
So, Alex, just recently a big vote in the Senate to see that level of bipartisanship. I think for those of us who are looking for silver linings is a positive thing. Size of the bill, a breakdown. Why don't you give it to us?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, this is the first real bipartisan bill we've seen in about 5 years. Obviously, most of the senators and congressmen have really been siding with their party lines for the most part. This was a real big feather in the cap for the president because he came out during the election and during the campaign saying that he needs to get this bipartisan infrastructure bill done. Obviously, he came out with a bigger number, but they finally, again, being bipartisan, you have to concede some stuff. So it came out to be a $2.1 trillion package, which really is a big bill for our needs here in the country. Roads, bridges,
right?
Especially, we haven't had an upgrade. This is the largest dedicated bill for upgrades to our roads and bridges since the 1950s, when the interstate was actually created.
Yeah, and you're talking, for decades and really since the beginning of the country, one of the real bipartisan things that have been consistently bipartisan has been infrastructure. And one of the sad pieces that over the last 25, 30 years, that what was always recognized as a bipartisan issue, infrastructure, has become much more difficult. But this is a positive. For those of us who have difficulty getting around $2+ trillion, this is broken down by categories, and I know you prepared some to give a sense of our viewers the breakdowns of what that means in different kind of categories. So you mentioned roads and bridges, airports, there's broadband. I mean,
so you have $110 billion for roads and bridges. Again, it's a huge number, but it's a necessity, especially for us that live in the Northeast, where the infrastructure is very old. That really does create a lot of good jobs.
More stresses because of the winter and the seasons.
We deal with a lot of different things up here in the Northeast. But again, decaying bridges and roads really need to be addressed. But again, it's going to create a lot of jobs. It's going to help the economy, stimulate us, get back into a regular cycle of bringing dollars back into the community. You have transit and rail. You and I talk about rail all the time and how important it is, a big piece of not just, the congestion issue that we deal with, but the environmental issue that we also deal with. And, obviously in the last week or so, we've seen the headlines about how climate control and climate change is a real thing, and we really need to get on top of it. Adding, dollars to transit and to freight rail will really help alleviate that. So there's about 39.
Yeah, and that's it's a big thing. We have people aren't taking commuter rail and public transit. Those are cars and trucks off the road. If we modernize our rail infrastructure so that it can be utilized more frequently by both passenger and freight rail, every freight train set takes literally hundreds of trucks that would otherwise be on our highways emitting greenhouse gas emissions. So this is not just infrastructure and jobs, it is also good, environmental stewardship.
Absolutely. And, again, in 2019, Boston and the 45-mile radius outside of it was named the worst traffic in America, beating the New York traffic, the LA traffic. After the pandemic, we dropped down to number 2 behind New York. But it's still, again, taking those cars and trucks off the road is really going to help us going forward. There's going to be an investment into Amtrak, which is going to help the Northeast corridor and kind of connect from Maine all the way down to D.C., which means that from Boston, you really could take a train, a high-speed rail train, to D.C. in 2 hours, so 2.5 hours. That's amazing. I mean,
and that gives some, for those of us in Central Massachusetts, we've seen the role that expanded commuter rail has played in giving, our residents of Central Mass more access. It has played a significant role in new investment into Central Mass along those rail stops. but this will also hopefully put some dollars to facilitate what has been a goal for a lot of policymakers and environmental and transportation advocates for years, would be Boston to Worcester to Springfield, out to Pittsfield, and then the inland route. You could literally go through Connecticut and New York and access.
Right, and hit that area, absolutely. So that's a big one. Again, obviously in Massachusetts, the East-West Rail has been talked about, and this is going to help expand that. The big one that we really are really happy about will be the expansion of broadband. During the pandemic, we realized that broadband isn't just a luxury; it's really a necessity now, and it should be dealt with.
It is now part. It is infrastructure as important as electricity, water, and sewer.
Yeah, it really should be dealt with as a utility versus kind of a luxury. Obviously, remote workers and remote learners. They realize that not having sustainable, quality, high-speed internet really does hinder progress. So there's going to be, $65 billion in upgrading that infrastructure, which is going to help. Places in Massachusetts, some of the places in Massachusetts, Western Mass, don't even have high-speed internet.
One of the things that we learned during this pandemic, unfortunately, is yes, we know many of those rural areas are completely underserved. Yeah. But even in our cities, especially our gateway cities, we have neighborhoods, oftentimes, with a whole host of challenges, where kids couldn't get online.
Yeah. Which is sad. I mean, for being 2021 and we're talking about not being able to access high-speed internet, that's really, especially in a state like Massachusetts where we really value some of these things. So this
funding will allow to address those economically disadvantaged neighborhoods in the cities, as well as rural areas that are challenged geographically, but also sometimes economically disadvantaged.
Yeah, and it's going to allow places like Worcester to decide on whether they want to go as a municipal broadband or do they want to have other competitors come in. So it's going to be a real big piece for us to going forward with any kind of learning or remote working. So the other piece too, again for Worcester, it's a big deal. Airports and ports are going to get $17 billion just for port infrastructure, $25 billion for airports. The Worcester Regional Airport has become a place to fly from and to. This money will help allocate some of the things that you need. We're lucky now. We have the Cat 3 system ready to go here, so you can land these planes.
So significant, Congressman McGovern working with Massport, $30 million investment, Category 3 instrument landing system. So basically, planes can land in almost any weather conditions.
Right.
And now with post-COVID, JetBlue returning, hopefully Delta and American returning at some point, and potentially other airlines. Continuing to make those improvements are going to be important.
Yeah, of course. And then, we're hoping obviously that all those airlines come back and we add some more. Maybe we add some medium-sized airlines come in here. These dollars will help us do that. And then another piece that we always talk about here at the Chamber is environmental remediation. So there's going to be $21 billion in brownfields remediation, which, a place like Worcester, gateway cities like Worcester, Lowell, New Bedford, traditionally have a lot of brownfields. And in order to be able to make them pad ready, those contaminated lands have to be remediated in order to build on.
Yeah, a lot of our economic success here in Worcester has been kind of public-private partnerships, cobbling together state monies, using the brownfield tax credits, some of the grants that are available, same thing with the federal level, cleaning up former industrial sites. And it's not just cities, it's many of our mill towns in the Blackstone Valley or across the state. You did a great job working with some of our partners and helping and Lieutenant Governor Polito fix some problems that were happening in the Brownfields tax credit program and working with our private sector partners to make sure we're fully taking advantage of that program as well as the Brownfields Revolving Loan Fund. Having this extra level of federal money coming now can again accelerate projects. And whether it's a Brownfields project, whether it's an infrastructure road project or bridge or broadband, it's not just the people doing the work. It activates supply chains for materials. It activates designers, engineers. They employ people. So infrastructure is proven to really be a plus for the economy.
Yeah, and I think that's why it was a little more bipartisan than other bills that have been presented, because I think it's across the country. I think it's a necessity, and I think that everybody needs upgrades on all systems, and we talk about, water and pipes. We have an old aging infrastructure here in the city of Worcester, and I know the city manager is addressing that through some of the ARPA money, the American Rescue Plan Act money. But again, we need to do the entire system.
I think there's we had Commissioner Fink of the DPW here, and we just got a minute left, but 30% of the pipes in Worcester water and sewer are still over 100 years old. Yeah. So there's a challenge there, and we saw what happens in places like Flint, Michigan. We don't want that to be happening
And that was my next
anywhere
point.
around here.
That was my next point. I mean, you have places like Flint who really have contaminated water, and they need to address that now.
Well, we'll keep our viewers updated. Thanks for joining us in this segment, Alex. And thank you, our viewers, for being with us for this edition of Chamber Exchange, and Bank Hometown for making it happen as our sponsor.